broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's show. I am finally back. I'm back here in the new WilmsFront home studio. It is Tuesday the 24th of March 2020. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne. We are live on just the Tim Wilms YouTube channel for now. Obviously, since I last came to you in the Unshackled studio, coronavirus containment measures have been ramped up significantly. So I decided to do my bit to practice social distancing by setting up my studio here at home. I hope that everyone can hear me in the chat. I sent out a photo of the new studio set up last night. I've just got the basic audio interface with the mic here. I've got dug out my old Logitech webcam. So just going by bare basics. No green screen in the backdrop. You can see I'm going to decorate what I've got behind me. So that bookcase is empty. I'm going to move some of my books in here, and you can see a bit of what's in my library there. I've got the Swiss bank account vaults behind me. I'm going to decorate that with a few flags and a secondary storage desk or second desk in. I tried. The desk that I've got here is much better than that one there. There's not enough space for me to move and stretch my legs. And so, as people in the chat have pointed out, not only am I 20 minutes late for tonight's show, but I'm also a day late because obviously it took me a while to get settled in here, and also to get through all of the technical things as well, because with new audio interfaces it takes you a while to get used to the systems and the technical setup. I'm pretty good, but this is a whole new thing, but I finally made it. You can probably hear there's a bit of croak in my voice as well, which is why I'm practicing social distancing. It doesn't seem like coronavirus at the moment. I've just got a bit of a sore throat. Main thing for me is I've got to drink plenty of water. That's what I'm doing. And have some of the throat lozenges. I believe that they've been rationed at the supermarket as well. Purchase limits. So where do I begin? Because I know that in the previous episodes of WilmsFront and the Uncuckables, I've played down the likelihood of a national lockdown, but it seems to be the buzzword here at the moment. So why don't first let's have a look at the state of the coronavirus pandemic in Australia. So hopefully my screen share here still works. Damn it. I'll bring it up for you in a moment. But I'm going to bring you first the Australian figures and then bring you the international figures, because the reason why authorities and governments have now taken such drastic measures is because, what do they say? They want to flatten the curve of infections. Now I think I've just got this all set up here. So bring it out again. I wanted to do flashbang first show, but of course there are always teething problems with any new setup, and yeah, as you know, it's just me here in my own studio at the moment. I haven't got much else help here. So here we go. Now I've got the figures here. So here we can see here. So as of 3 p.m. Melbourne time on 24th of March 2020, there have been 2,136 confirmed cases of coronavirus, Wuhan flu, China virus, or COVID-19 in Australia. There have been 427 new cases since 3 p.m. yesterday in a 24-hour period there. So Australian Capital Territory, 39. New South Wales, that's had the most significant increase in cases there. They're almost up to 1,000 just by themselves, 913. Northern Territory, 5. Queensland, 397. South Australia, 170. Tasmania, 26. Victoria, 411. And Western Australia, 175. So as you can see, it's basically risen by 1,000 over the weekend there. And we are a federation of states, and we have the 2 Commonwealth territories, all as well as we had the borders closed to foreigners at the end of last week. Now we have all state borders closed. All the states and territories are now falling into line, closing their borders. It used to be that you had to isolate for 14 days if you were crossing state lines, but Tasmania is now banning anybody who is non-essential from flying to Tasmania. So unless they're like a health professional or are there to help out with the coronavirus, then they won't be allowed in Tasmania. Savnik has said practice social distancing in the chat. It's not a computer virus yet, thankfully. That's probably the last thing that we need in the world right now. But let's have a look at the global figures now, because they are even more disturbing at the moment. So I'll just bring those up here. Going up the top here, I'll go by total deaths. So here we go. Italy has reached 6,000 deaths. They have 63,000 coronavirus cases. China, 81,078 new cases. But look at their deaths. It's now half of Italy. Or so that's what they're telling us. Of course, we rightfully don't believe anything that comes out of communist China, where the virus was born in that disgusting wet market in Wuhan. Spain it's catching up to Italy with 35,000 cases, over 2,300 deaths. Iran, that's been very bad for quite a while, 23,000 cases, 1,800 deaths. We look at France they're nearly at 20,000 cases, nearly at 1,000 deaths. USA, 43,000 cases, 553 deaths. UK, which is now in complete lockdown. Boris Johnson has said, do not leave the house unless you've got to go get essential things from the supermarket or pharmacy. 6,650 cases, 335 deaths. And look at Germany here, 29,000 cases here, but they've only had 123 deaths, which... I know that Germany has banned gatherings of 2 or more people, which is pretty drastic, and they've coupled that. They've still managed to do a far-right crackdown there. But have a look at Switzerland. That's only a nation of 8 million people. They've got 8,795 cases of coronavirus and 120 cases. And you have a look at total cases per 1 million population. Switzerland over 1,000. Italy over 1,000. We have a look at... Australia at the moment here. We recorded our eighth death today, and that was a 70-year-old woman who came from that Ruby Princess cruise ship, which was for some reason allowed to dock at Sydney harbour, and all the people, even though they had signs of coronavirus, some had been confirmed, were just allowed to disperse in the community. And state and federal governments have been pointing fingers at each other. It's been total, absolute, bloody disaster. Now the Unshackled studio is still in operation. Steel Archer is using it to broadcast his detonation program. He'll be the only one occupying it during the pandemic. So me and Steele are practicing social distancing, because I've said this to you before, and it's worth saying to you again, that last winter, myself, Steele, Dave and Maddie from XYZ, Neil Exton and Blair Cottrell, we all got the flu likely from each other, and I was completely knocked out for 2 to 3 weeks. It was absolutely horrible, and that was just the flu in the immediate circle. And this is why that social distancing should be practiced. And obviously last winter this was just the flu. And I remember when I collapsed in a heap last winter, I was attending one of Blair's mentions at the county court for his appeal against his Racial and Religious Tolerance Act conviction under Section 25, subsection 2. I attended that in the morning. It only went for about half an hour. I took the train back, and then when I got back to the studio that day, I pretty much collapsed in a heap in the studio. I was absolutely delirious. And so obviously with the coronavirus, it is spreading much more rapidly. Of course, it is much more deadly than the common flu. That's why I am self-isolating, because, well, as you can see, I collapsed in a heap after I'd taken public transport and been in a public place, which is absolutely what you should not do with the coronavirus. Because as we saw with the social distancing measures that were issued last weekend by the Commonwealth Chief Medical Officer, Professor Brendan Murphy, people stay 1.5 metres apart. We're told that social distancing is our greatest weapon in killing the virus, so it can't find a new host. Unfortunately, on the weekend at beaches, pubs, cafes, and even private functions and parties, social distancing guidelines were blatantly disregarded. So on Sunday night, the National Cabinet met. They are meeting right now as we speak, and they decided to close all non-essential services at midday Monday for the time being. That includes pubs, clubs, restaurants, cafes, gyms, sporting venues, and even places of worship, which is why I'm so eager to get my guest, Daniel Secomb, on in a moment. The AFL, NRL, and A-League have all suspended their seasons. We already knew that Anzac Day services were cancelled. It's going to be a virtual Anzac Day with a ceremony from the National War Memorial. We are utilising the internet and telecommunications we have in the modern world for me to keep communicating with you, bringing you the news, and also so we can all stay sane as well, that we're not completely isolated. We can still communicate with each other just in the virtual world. Obviously, supermarkets, pharmacies, petrol stations, bottle shops, takeaway, and retail shops remain open, including hairdressers. Obviously, supermarkets, so they can get the shelves restacked as much as possible. They are all closing. Coles and Woolworths at 8 p.m. local time, and then they are reopening at 7 a.m. In the morning for pensioner and those with a disability shopping hour. They are both working on a dedicated home shop for those with low mobility. So those pensioners who find it difficult to get up early in the morning and, of course, queue up, they can have dedicated home delivery. It's obviously supermarkets are adjusting as much as they can to it, and we saw on the weekend a few more products on the shelf that were missing, but there's still toilet paper is still running out pretty quickly. There are strict quantity limits on products which people have been stockpiling, which seems to be working to slowly get the shelves back up there. But as I said, Australia's not going to starve. We've got enough to feed 3 Australias at the moment. Now, Parliament sat for one day yesterday with a reduced Parliament of 90 MPs, and obviously to lead by example, they practiced social distancing. Oh yes, the gyms have shut as well. So for those of you who are already invested in a home gym, you can stay fit. Obviously, I am the way that I'm going to stay healthy during the coronavirus pandemic, since since I'm socially isolated here at home, is I'm going to cook again, cook healthy steaks and veggies. No more TV dinners and fast food. And of course, dieting is half the battle there to try and stay healthy and fit and slim down. But I've digressed there. So what federal parliament has, and our parliament now is working in a fully bipartisan way. Question time, both from questions from the opposition and the government backbenchers, were all constructive questions. They weren't Dorothy Dix's or gotcha ones. So the 750 one-off payments to New Start recipients, pensioners, and those on low incomes, that'll be coming at the 31st of March still. So in 1 week, the New Start has been doubled to $1,100 a fortnight, and there is also, for those who've suffered loss of income but not loss of job, there is a $550 fortnightly coronavirus supplement. I believe it's fortnightly, but I'm happy to be corrected there. And not surprisingly, we have seen on Monday and today queues outside of Centrelink offices around the nation. The MyGov website crashed both today and yesterday, and as you know, I'm not religious, but somebody help us, because we are probably stuck with the most incompetent minister in charge of government services at the moment, with Stuart Roberts here. Minister discouraged Centrelink's line, assures my government website has improved. So he said, we prepared over the weekend for 55,000 concurrent visitors. I didn't think we'd have to prepare for 100,000 concurrent users. My bad, not realising the sheer scale of the decision on Sunday night by national leaders that saw literally hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million people unemployed overnight. Yeah, well, you probably should have realised that. What do you think was going to happen? They're predicting 1 to 2 million unemployed, and where else are they going to go? They're going to either go to the Centrelink offices or they're going to go to the MyGov website. Yes, and Stuart Roberts, he blamed hackers originally, and then was forced to backtrack and say, no, it was just a overload. It wasn't a direct denial of service attack. No, just a lot of people accessed it. That, of course, is the logical explanation here. And of course, Stuart Roberts has form with his level of clumsiness and incompetence. So if I just go here, this is from The Guardian, warns us this article is more than a year old. Stuart Roberts repays nearly $38,000 for home internet bills. Assistant Treasurer charged taxpayers more than $1,000 a month for data since 2016. The federal government set Roberts a bill after it was revealed he had charged taxpayers more than $1,000 a month for data at his Gold Coast home since 2016. Special Minister of State Alex Hawke had been advised the Finance Department signed up on his internet connection. Due to the location of his residence, Mr. Roberts was only able to access mobile broadband services with limited monthly download capabilities. But of course, this is the minister responsible for robo-debt, which I assume has been suspended now. It was a disgraceful program to basically use some income averaging algorithm to claim that heaps of people owed money. So Robert wrote on Twitter that after his colleagues issued a media release, he had paid $37,975 back, which reflected excess usage charges beyond those covered under the plan. So yes, he's able to just repay the money as a politician, but what about all of those who've been harassed by his robo-debt program? An absolute disgrace. And of course, he should resign right now, Stuart Roberts, because he is clearly not up to the job of managing Centrelink and MyGov during the pandemic. But he resigned from the Turnbull ministry back in February 2016 after it was revealed he had shares in a trust linked to the mining company of a generous liberal donor. And this is the photo here. Mr. Roberts maintained this was a private visit, despite meeting with senior Chinese officials there. So he's accident prone, he's incompetence prone, and you're probably wondering how he got the job, how he was rehired into the Morrison Government ministry. And the reason is because he and Scott Morrison are church buddies. They're both Pentecostal Christians, and I'm not saying that to bag their Pentecostal religion. I would bag this sort of nepotism, whether they were drinking buddies or sports club buddies or whatever. I mean, this promoting a mate with such a checkered history, basically because you have something in common. This is why people don't trust politicians. On the other hand, let's give some praise where it's due. Greg Hunt, who is the federal health minister, he is probably the most technocratical minister in the cabinet, but in times of crisis, that is now a strength. I know that there's been a lot of anger directed at Greg Hunt because he refuses to legalize vaping despite all the benefits that it would provide. But you might have seen that under Greg Hunt's health department, assisted by the state governments as well, more than 160,000 tests have been conducted across Australia. And Greg Hunt in a press conference said today that that testing per capita population has now exceeded South Korea, who has been, thanks to widespread testing, they were able to contain the coronavirus. As I mentioned, the UK is in total lockdown, otherwise their National Health Service, their socialised medicine system, cannot hope. Each state in the United States is overseeing their own containment measures because that is how their federation is set up, and they're managing their own lockdowns there. All governments all around the world are worried about a lack of ventilators, ICU beds and face masks, and of course the fact that for ventilators and face masks to be manufactured en masse, they need to make sure that all the raw materials are in the country where the ventilators and face masks are being produced for. And as I said, we must never forget where this virus was born, in communist China, at that disgusting food market in Wuhan. They claim, Chinese Communist Party, they have got the virus under control and life is returning back to normal. But seriously, if China wants to prevent locking down their own cities and spreading the virus to the West, and of course the globalists, they should share some responsibility for spreading the virus. It is mainly globalist leaders who have got the coronavirus, and they should have shut down our borders much sooner. I know that the bat soup meme originated when the coronavirus first made its way into Western news. Although it might not have been bat soup specifically, this strand of human coronavirus did originate from bat coronavirus. So maybe we should call it bat flu, because of course we had bird flu, swine flu, equine flu. So we could also call it bat flu as well. I know the XYZ guys call it diversity flu. I prefer to call it globalist flu. Now, turning to my featured guests for tonight, as I just said, places of worship are now required by the both state and federal government, and of course Scott Morrison, he's Pentecostal Christian. He is the Prime Minister who's decreed that places of worship now have to be shut. Most of them had already announced that their Easter services were cancelled and had moved to e-sermons and streaming online. Now, what's occurred during pandemics, plagues, natural and man-made disasters in the past is people have turned to religion for answers to improve their state of mind and perspective. That has not happened here. Our faith, it seems, in fighting and containing the coronavirus is with governments, politicians, medical experts, and those on the front line in the health sector and essential services. the fact that religion in our society has completely shut down in the West is, I previously mentioned, this is something worth exploring, and I'll just bring Daniel now on Skype. So, Daniel, we did a lot of preparation, getting the technical aspects up, but can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'll ask the audience now. Can you hear Daniel? I'll just wait for them to reply. And we are a half an hour later than originally scheduled to bring you in. So thank you for your Christian patience in, though we were scheduled to do this last night as well. So not only am I late bringing you on tonight, but last night as well. So thank you so much.
No worries.
And well, first I should ask, how are you doing personally?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I mean, I work from home anyway, so it's no really big deal. I mean, I've been working in quarantine for the past 15 years, so it's not that much of an issue for me, although now we have the kids home, so that's making it a little bit tricky. And my wife is not working out as much now, so yeah, we just got to manage floor space and all that kind of thing, but yeah, we're doing okay.
And how it's not a secret. Your wife's name is Tammy. You've got 3 kids, so they're all managing. They're all healthy.
All healthy. Yep. The only one who's had sniffles has been me. So
okay. I've had this, as I said to my audience beginning of the show, a bit of a sore throat. I haven't got a fever or anything like that, but to set a good example, social distancing. Even if you've got the means to not go out, stay home, protect others.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, for those who don't know about Daniel, he is a Christian end times speaker and Bible teacher. And your biography mentioned that you'd ministered at various churches and conferences throughout Australia and the United States. Obviously, you're not doing that at the moment. No travel. And you're also the founder of the Christian news websites Israel, Islam, and End Times, and Culture War Resource.
Correct.
So first, I'll ask you. Obviously, I just mentioned with there's no more ministry work can be done by physical traveling. So in that regard, how has your work changed? How are Christians communicating with each other? Because as I mentioned, places of worship have shut down, it's quite unprecedented. I mean, as you and my audience know, I'm an atheist, so I probably don't appreciate the gravity of churches closing and not holding Easter services.
Yeah, it is unprecedented. One of the most startling photos that I saw floating around on social media was a photo of the Western Wall completely empty, a photo of the Vatican Square, with the Vatican Square completely empty, and a photo of Mecca completely empty. So you absolutely are right in saying that we are living in unprecedented times. There's no question about that. I just got back from a meeting with my pastor, and we initially were going to roll out a plan for us to gather in small groups. Different houses will have people will basically be hosting little small group sessions. But now with the latest recommendations from the government, we are now looking at taking everything completely online. So we're looking at doing Zoom and getting each of the people connected with that, so that each of the home group leaders would just simply get on Zoom, send out an invitation to each of the different participants, and they will log in that way. So that's the way we're looking at it. However, I went to set up Zoom for my dad yesterday, and I couldn't even get on. It's like Zoom was being inundated. So yeah, interesting times.
One of my Uncockables co-hosts, James Fox Higgins, he actually recommends Zoom over Skype because
I
for
do
some
too.
reason his internet doesn't work well on Skype, but it works perfect on Zoom. We are via Skype now, and that seems to be working perfectly. I remember when, because I first interviewed you, you were one of my early guests on the Unshackled Waves program. I was based at home. Obviously, you still work a lot at home, but I remember both our internets were quite bad then on my end and your end, but we're doing all right with the live stream on my end and your end, because a lot of people have been talking about everyone online. Have we got the bandwidth on our national broadband network brought to us by Kevin Rudd and Stephen Conroy? But it seems to be holding up quite well.
Yes, no problem so far.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that they've talked about, because obviously everyone is now working from home as much as possible. I mentioned e-sermons. How have Christians responded to this? Because obviously you and your pastor, you understand, so you're compliant with the social distancing guidelines here, but ordinary Christians who, because I mentioned in the past during plagues and pandemics, the church has played a big role, but its religion seems to have come to a standstill.
Yeah, and that's what makes these circumstances even the more unique. The church has been on the front foot for the majority of cases throughout history where there has been plagues and pestilences and delivering humanitarian need and all those kinds of things. But this one is what we're experiencing right now is really, definitely unusual. Definitely unusual. I would even put it even down to biblical. I think the Bible has a lot to say about where we're at the moment, and I see for many of us as Christians, we were kind of expecting these days to come anyway. So it for me, I started my Israel, Islam and End Times back in my website and my ministry back in 2013. That's where I really had a strong sense to start that website and start to get people to be informed in regards to what's going on in our world at the moment. But we're definitely seeing this ramp up, this building up, and we opened up the year with, initially last year, leading up to last year, we had massive drought, and then that gave way to I wouldn't say fires, but we had fires. I've seen. I look like I've frozen a little bit.
We so the internet.
We're jinxing the internet. So yeah, we had those massive bush, and then we had the drought. We had the floods, and after the floods, we're now experiencing this massive global pandemic, which is completely unprecedented. So all these things that are going on at the moment, like I said to you before, they haven't really caught us by surprise. The Bible actually has a lot about these kinds of things. Basically, God says in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 13, he says, "When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain," so you can basically referring to the drought that we had, which led up to the fires, "or command locusts to devour the land," he says, and we're experiencing massive locust plagues in northeast Africa, which are now consuming large parts of the Middle East at the moment, and there are new swarms actually forming as we speak, which are tipped to devour most of the Middle East, that will go up to Passover. And then it goes on to say, "Or command locust plagues to devour the land, or send a plague among my people." So there we have the drought, there we have the locust plagues, and then we have the plague or the pestilence that he sends. He says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn away from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. So it's almost as if God is trying to get our attention at the moment. So that's one of the firm beliefs that we have at the moment, that his patience is wearing thin, and that's exactly why we're experiencing what we're experiencing at the moment.
A few people have complained about my sound level. I've noticed with this, I've got to be as close to the microphone as possible. Just to my audience, is my sound level now is at about the same as Daniel's? Let me know in the chat. But yes, that was you. Basically preempted my next question, and that to show that I've done my homework on this. The Abrahamic religions, which are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they have theologies known as
eschatology.
Eschatology. I'm not good at pronunciation.
Yeah, that's all right.
But that predicts an end times, end of days, or judgment day. And you mentioned the locusts in Africa. I had not heard that at all. But of course, as we know, locusts is a sign of plagues, though, or end times.
Yeah.
But we have seen, because I would say Monday was probably the beginning of where we saw it really hit people hard. The fact that there's at least going to be a recession, probably a depression, maybe something worse than that, 1 to 2 million unemployed. We saw the Centrelink lines. They looked largely orderly, but I think probably just people were demoralized. We do have public order in place, though we do see people, as I mentioned in my introduction, flagrantly ignoring social distancing. The worst we've seen is those supermarket fights over toilet paper, but they have died down. So I know a lot of people have said this could get a lot worse. People could get just much more desperate, demoralized. A lot of us have been poor at predicting where this might go. So how do you think this is likely to play out? Because National Cabinet's meeting right now, they might introduce even stricter contagion measures.
Personally, I think it's going to get a bit. It's going to be worse before it gets better. I tend to believe that we'll start to see this thing wrap up. Well, not wrap up, but I think we'll get back to see signs of normality around mid-May. But that's just my thoughts. But I think we still aren't going to see the end of this. It's going to be a very rocky road. That's what I'm trying to say. Very rocky road. So, yeah, how do I guess interpret this? People can say, well, how can God do this? Why would he do this? From a Christian perspective. And I guess I sort of touched on it earlier. The thing is that the Bible says that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So if righteousness exalts a nation, the opposite is true. Wickedness basically removes God's hand of blessing. And we have been a blessed nation for many years. I mean, we've been known as the lucky country. In fact, I don't really believe... I don't believe that we are lucky. I think that we have been blessed. We've just been blessed because we've lived under this Christian worldview, which has caused us to succeed and do so well, as much as Western civilization has done well. In fact, Western civilization is Western civilization because of Christianity. Christianity laid the foundation in regard to the laws that we have and things like that. So I guess... as I said before, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to many people. And at the moment, we are seeing our nation pull away from our Christian heritage. This is why we are seeing the rise of the left. The left are becoming more and more powerful because we are basically cutting off the anchors, cutting off the chains to our anchors, where we our Christian worldview has basically kept us in a state of freedom and a state of economic prosperity and a state of stability for a very long time. And now the left is really pushing hard in pulling us away from Christianity. And see, we are transitioning at the moment. We're transitioning from a Christian worldview to a post-Christian worldview. And in the process, with that happening, what the left is doing at the moment, they're trying to get rid of the old moral code. The old moral code, which is basically what we have inherited from Christianity. It's so we've been going by the Ten Commandments inadvertently, subconsciously, in many, I guess, if you could put it that way. But now the left are basically taking it upon themselves, where they think that they can be, let's just say, gods, and they can come up with their own moral code. And that's exactly what political correctness is. Political correctness is the new moral code for a people that have rejected God. And that is why we are experiencing so much madness in society. The madness, you've seen the mad. In fact, you report on a lot of the madness. But the madness is really extraordinary. And I cannot help but think of a quote by G.K. Chesterton, who said, when man ceases to believe in God, it is not that he then believes in nothing, it is that he is capable of believing anything. And so this is why it's an open slather at the moment in regard to the ridiculous things that our culture has completely swallowed, that man can be a woman and woman can be a man, and there is no end to the madness. I mean, just every single day you open up your laptop and go to a news site and you just think the bar has been raised in madness. So, but again, the Bible speaks about these times. The Bible says that there will be a powerful delusion that will come upon the people, a powerful delusion. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. The Bible also says there will be an increase of wickedness. Now, of course, to the left, they don't believe in right and wrong. They don't believe in objective good and evil. So they wouldn't know if what they're doing is evil. They just base it on their own understanding of what they think is good and what they think is bad. In fact, for many leftists, what they think is actually good to them is actually squaring off against their enemies. That's what they think is good. And so you can see how this relativism has basically given way to narcissism. Narcissism has given way to nihilism. And we are now living in a state where the culture has become so utterly wicked. And what does a wicked culture do to good people? I mean, this is the old adage that evil people hate good people. You just have to watch any.
Oh, I've lost you there for a moment. We'll get him back.
Stereotypical. The bad guy hates the good guys, and this goes right back to what George Orwell said: the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those that speak it. And Jesus warned about that. He said, you'll be hated by all nations because of me. You'll be put into prison, Jesus warned. And already we're seeing things like that happening in England, where street preachers are being arrested. We're seeing a Finnish politician who's been threatened with jail time because she quoted, in fact, she was pretty much like Finland's version of Israel Folau, except she's facing jail time because she paraphrased the Bible verse on homosexuality. So we're seeing persecution ramp up big time. And so, again, this is no surprise.
Yeah, well, we've seen you mentioned the police in the UK was that investigating people for misgendering, and now they've got to actually do real police work to make sure that people are obeying the national lockdown. But you mentioned delusion there, and obviously there's been a lot of tweets and memes that there's been no more mentions about non-binary genders, which is the ultimate delusion there since the pandemic. And a lot of people pointed out that, and you can mention climate change with this as well. All first world problems have completely evaporated. Using the right pronouns that won't save you from getting the coronavirus. I mean, the virus is, Josh Frydenberg said last night, this is an enemy that has no face, no flag. It also has no mind. It does not...
it's indiscriminate.
Yeah.
100%. I want to know if Greta Thunberg has gone back to school.
Well, schools are shut down, so I'm not sure about Sweden individually, but this has totally killed her climate strikes, because how can you strike from school if they're shut down? Yeah. But that was sort of the new age religion. Tim Flannery, thought of himself as a climate prophet, talked about Gaia, the natural earth deity. And we have you talked about wickedness as well. We've seen a lot of, I don't know the exact amount, but the pornography industry chews up a lot of internet traffic as well. Obviously, we've seen the hospitality and live entertainment industry shut down as well. That's where a lot of degeneracy happened. I mean, look at the music festivals, for example, how much grief they've brought over the past few years. But I know you don't use the word God's punishment. You say he removes his protection, which is actually the correct terminology. But we've seen, I'm not sure how much of a target you are, but we saw Israel Folau. He was heavily criticized for saying, well, this is what the media said. He said that the bushfires were God's punishment for the state of New South Wales legalizing abortion and same-sex marriage. I interviewed Danny Ninalia a few months back after the Victorian Black Saturday bushfires in 2009. He was condemned for saying a similar thing because Victoria, just before the bushfires, had legalized abortion. And this is... You mentioned we're both talking about the decline of Christianity. This is how people such as yourself are treated when you say that there's a biblical explanation for it. You say, how dare you say that the people deserve this, that they deserve the bushfires, the droughts for this. What type of insensitive person are you? But with the climate religion, they feel completely at liberty to say the bushfires are a punishment for not caring for the earth and reducing carbon emissions. So there is a double standard.
Yeah, look, our culture has been basically has this false assumption. And the false assumption is based on that the Christian God is a God of love. He's full of mercy. He's full of grace. He's always forgiving. You can do whatever you want, but if you just come back to God and say, "Look, I'm sorry," and just go out the next day and keep doing it, and God's always smiling. He's always smiling. He's always full of love. He's like your old gentle, warm and cuddly grandpa kind of a thing, But that is a massive, an extremely dangerous false assumption, because God is just as perfect in his wrath and in his judgment as in his love and in his mercy. So we need to be careful that we don't focus so much on zero in on particular aspects of God's nature and his character, because God is holistic in his character. I mean, he has all the different aspects of his character that we all have. I mean, we all get angry, we all get full of mushy, gooey love feelings, warm and fuzzies, and things like that. But we need to understand that if when you read the Bible and get a grasp of God's nature and His character, yes, He is a God of love and He is a God of mercy, but He's also extremely patient, and this is what we need to understand. His patience always comes to an end. When it comes to the story of the ark, the door of the ark eventually was shut, and those who were left outside of the ark perished. So the patience of God comes to an end, where He will no longer put up with the wickedness of a particular nation or civilization. And what we are experiencing right now is basically where it's a time of reckoning. It's a time of reckoning where basically we are beginning to witness. Now, Jesus explained that that one of the major signs in the lead up to His return would be like the birth pains of major events. So He said there's going to be He said there will be earthquakes. He said there will be famines. In fact, let me just quickly read it to you. This is from Luke. He says, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be great earthquakes, famines, he says, pestilences, there you go, viruses, and various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. So, but Jesus said that all these things will happen within the context of birth pains. In other words, when a woman goes into labor, she has contractions. And so initially, when my wife was pregnant, she would experience a thing called Braxton Hicks contractions. They're not actually really contractions at all. They're fake contractions. But these are a lead up to the real contractions. And eventually the real contractions kick in. And boy, you know it when the real contractions come. So we've experienced lots and lots of fake contractions, but all of a sudden, right now, over the past 3 months, we are experiencing a major contraction. And Jesus said this is exactly what you need to look for. I would imagine in another couple of months, this will go by the wayside and coronavirus will be in memory. But then, and there'll be a period of time where there's peace and normality. But I believe there will come another time where there will be another intense birth pain. And the thing with birth pains is that the closer you get to the woman, to the baby being born, the birth pains become more intense and closer together. More intense, closer together. The further you are away from that, they're not as intense and they're far apart. So that's exactly how Jesus said to gauge His return in regard to the last days events. And this is why I'm saying, whenever I say, yeah, we're in the last days, I'm not saying that Jesus is going to appear within the next, 48 hours. I'm not saying that at all. Neither would He appear within the next week or even, month or even years. What I am saying is that this is not the end, but it is the beginning of the end.
During the outbreak of the pandemic, there have been, your other website is Culture War Resource, there have been some culture warriors who have been condemned for their comments on the coronavirus. One of them was Laurie Alexander, who is the transformed wife. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work, but she, in a recent post, and I am getting this information from Pink News, so I've actually read the quotes, not the headline here, but she admitted she was not a regular hand washer, not afraid of germs, but she believed that culture war issues such as abortion, transgenderism, pornography, sex trafficking were more destructive than the virus. And then we also saw, Margaret Court, she's always mocked because she originally was not going to close her physical church services because she believed that her followers were going to be protected by the blood of Jesus. So I'll just get you to comment on those two comments.
Okay, the first one, what was her name again?
Laurie Alexander.
Laurie Alexander. Okay, so basically, and what direction was she coming from in regard to?
That she still believed that the culture war issues such as
Yeah,
abortion,
yeah,
transgenderism, pornography,
yeah,
sexual
yeah,
abuse
yeah.
were still more destructive than the virus. I mean, this story is
Mm.
dated on March 16th. That's a week later.
Oh look. Naturally speaking, I don't think it's. This is the thing. The abortion and all those culture war issues are what I would say are precursors. They are precursors to what we're experiencing now, I believe. So God, again, as I said before, this is a time of reckoning, and God's patience eventually comes to an end. So look, a lot of the if you if you're talking from a natural perspective, I mean, this virus with what it's doing upon to our country right now is far worse. But coming from her perspective, when you consider that all those culture war issues such as abortion, LGBT, and all that kind of stuff, it's a precursor that leads to this to where we are now. Now, in regard to Margaret Court, she's a hero of mine. I have great respect for her because she basically comes out with it and she's not afraid. Massive respect to her that she can actually come out and say what she says. By the way, what she's saying would have been perfectly acceptable 20 years ago. No one would have batted an eyelid. It's just that the fact that our culture has changed so much, we have descended so much into wickedness that we haven't noticed. In fact, it's the whole thing with the proverbial frog in the saucepan. Do you know what I mean when I talk about the frog in the saucepan?
Yeah, that's the. That's not a biblical reference, though. That's
No, it's not.
Frederick Hayek, The Road to Serfdom.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So the frog, if you were to throw a frog into a saucepan with boiling hot water, it would immediately jump out because it immediately senses that the surface of the water is extremely hot. However, if you were to put the frog in the saucepan and in cold water, but you put it on top of the stove and you slowly heat it up, the frog will eventually die. It will die from the increase in the temperature. The frog doesn't notice because it's cold-blooded, that it's actually cooking itself to death. But it's a great analogy because this is exactly where we are with Western civilization. We're not just us, but in England and in America and in any other Western nation, we have just basically gone headlong into depravity, headlong into degeneracy. And we haven't noticed. Although sometimes we notice when we go to, like Sanity, we pick up a really old DVD and we say, oh, why is that R-rated? Why that shouldn't be R-rated? When you pick it up one of Clint Eastwood's old movies and you look at the R rating, you think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, The Godfather was originally R-rated, which
Yeah.
apart from the horsehead scene, there's
Yeah.
not much else blood and gore.
Yeah, exactly. And also when we sing Christmas carols. When we sing Christmas carols, we realize, my goodness, this comes back from an era where we were so godly minded. We were so much more Christian orientated. And when we sang Christmas carols, they resonated with every single one of us because of the words. But now, like there are councils that are banning the Christmas carols, such as we saw over in Western Australia and even here in Sydney. They're banning them because they're completely it's foreign and alien to the culture that we live in right now. And Christianity has become something that is to be abhorred by, something to be absolutely repulsed by. And again, to us Christians, that doesn't come as any surprise.
We haven't mentioned yet, but you could say that this was probably the peak of the degeneracy and just the open sexual immorality was Drag Queen Story Hour, which it started in the United States and it's come to Australia as well. And in January we saw Wilson Gavin, who he was gay himself, though he was a Catholic conservative, protested Drag Queen Story Hour. He didn't interrupt the service; it was afterwards. He and his fellow protesters said drag queens are not for kids, but the social media backlash and bullying after that was so intense that he took his own life, and which is horrific that for simply saying that drag queens are not for kids. And I interviewed a drag queen, Kita Demure, a few weeks back, who agrees with Wilson Gavin and hates Drag Queen Story Hour because drag queens they've always been adult entertainers.
Absolutely. And
I know Alex Jones can be hyperbolic. He literally made the point that they look demonic, these drag queen story hour readers to children.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you just said it. I mean, it's they do look demonic, and it's not just a look thing. These people do not represent wholesome values at all. Part of the reason why it's taking off because leftists love the fact that they can have a dig at Christians, that they can have a dig at conservatives, and so they double down. And they are brazen in their support of it because they know how much it upsets conservatives. So they see it as a virtue signaling opportunity for them in which they can embrace tolerance and inclusivity. And of course, the victims are going to be their children, which they are completely blindsided by. Introducing children to these adult themes at such a young age is destructive. It doesn't end in a good way at all. And sadly, it'll be years from now where we will actually see the true wreckage from the damage that they're causing.
Where I come at it from an atheist perspective and cultural analysis point of view is that we've seen basically through what we've just talked about, the more selfish, narcissistic behavior, more living in the moment, not thinking about community, neighbors.
Yep.
Nobody would know, not many people would know who their next door neighbors are. And that's why we saw, despite this pandemic, those people at Bondi Beach congregating in pubs and clubs, not making the appropriate sacrifice, taking appropriate care. And I come at the coronavirus from an evolutionary perspective, is that viruses always evolve. We've had these pandemics all throughout history. I mentioned just this century we've had SARS, bird flu, swine flu, Ebola. We had the Zika virus just a few years back. And since we've also, I mentioned basically how we've become so dependent on other parts of the world, international trade. It was globalism that spread this virus so rapidly, our dependence, that we weren't self-reliant. We weren't saving for a rainy day. And now we're paying the price for that because we forgot that viruses are always one step ahead of us.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you've probably heard of the old saying that goes that I'm just trying to think of the term for it. But some of you might know what I'm talking about, where it says weak civilizations give way to tyrannical, to slavery, and then that brings forth that brings about the brave civilization, and the brave civilization leads to liberty. So there's like this cycle, and this is what we saw happening with the Roman Empire. when Rome fell, it fell because of a lot of the problems that we are actually experiencing right now. So the welfare state was a big one. The welfare state, and then also too, Rome was overrun with refugees. In fact, the Vandals were, or the Goths per se, were basically refugees that Rome actually let in. Then there was the high taxation. There was the servicing massive wars, servicing massive armies that were involved in campaigns all over the Roman world. And then there was the debauchery. There was the extreme debauchery of lifestyle in regard to homosexuality and all those kinds of things that were present in the Roman Empire. And eventually the Roman Empire couldn't hold up any longer and it collapsed. So in that sense, we are seeing that happening right now. And so it's very, very interesting, because here's what I'm concerned about, because if it happens to America, we're going to be in a very, very bad place. Because if America goes down, we all go down. In fact, it was Ronald Reagan who said that if we lose our freedom here, there is no other place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And I believe he's absolutely correct. If America goes down, we are gone. We are finished. And this is why I'm always, and I say this to the Americans myself when I go over there and speak to them. I say, listen, I'm an Australian. I'm not one of you. But listen, you need to know that we are totally for you being strong and maintaining your strength of leadership in the world. Because if you lose your leadership, we're gone. If China called the shots in the world, if China was the one who dominated the world, there'll be many of us that will be in the same position of the Muslims in China who are in concentration camps. And here's the thing that we need to understand. And America's values come from, well, just look at their founding documents. Much of their founding documents are all soaked in Christianity. And because of that, their constitution has brought about so much freedom, personal liberty. This is where there is emphasis on the individual, on the citizen, and where the government shrinks. Whereas in China, it's the opposite. It's the government that is preeminent, and the citizen doesn't matter. So, so we need at the moment we just we're heading down a very worrying trajectory, because I'm very, very concerned about the future of America. Whether they will be able to hold this, the status quo and basically maintain their strength of leadership in the world today. Because if the Democrats get in power, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Sure, we've had the Obama administration and things like that previously, but the Democrats have become so extreme that they are basically unrecognizable of the Democrats like 10 years ago. Now we have openly confessed card-carrying socialists who openly deal not only with the socialists but with communists. And the Democrat Party has been basically overrun by these people, including Ilhan Omar and
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh, AOC,
and,
absolutely.
It was that there's Rashida Tlaib and I believe
her.
it's Rihanna Presley. She's the one who's advocating release the prisoners to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Whereas release people from a social isolation. How does that help fight the coronavirus? And you really think they're in jail because they've broken the law? Are they going to obey social distancing when they get out?
No. In fact, the left rely upon these people to create agitation. The left rely upon criminals, and this is why they're so big on open borders, is because a very high percentage of the illegal immigrants who come up from Mexico are very large percentage of them have criminal records or have a criminal background. And the left really warm to these people because, first of all, they vote socialist because many of them have come from socialist nations themselves. And secondly, because they create agitation. They basically put a strain on law enforcement. And the left wants to outweigh, it wants to basically overwhelm law and order, because this is how they bring about their revolution, by putting a strain onto the law and order, and it makes people feel insecure. And when people are feeling insecure, what do they cry out for? Well, they cry out for more government, they cry out for more power, they cry out for more of a police state. And so this is exactly why they want to release them. They in fact, here's the other reason too. See, the left do not believe in right and wrong, as we discussed earlier. They do not believe in objective good and evil, okay? So they believe that criminals are not imprisoned because they are evil, because they don't believe in evil. They think that they are victims of an oppressive system. They believe that they are unfair victims of an oppressive system that needs to be abolished, and that's why they are so pro-criminal. And, you might think this is a bit extreme or over the top. It's not extreme at all. Just have a look at in San Francisco, where they were basically trying to reword phrases such as, for example, felons. You don't refer to them as felons. You call them justice-involved people.
Yes, I've heard about these new terms as well, and I would, although I don't recommend people watching mainstream media regularly, but outsiders on Sky News Sunday morning, they basically catalogue all of these ridiculous word changes, and that is one of them.
Yeah.
Let's focus on some silver linings that there might be as a result of once this pandemic is over, people reassess their lives, and or governments reassess how they've been conducting themselves. It was extremely disgusting that before New Zealand's lockdown, they rushed through their abortion decriminalisation bill, which basically it gives the nation one of the most extreme abortion laws in the world, as long as only one doctor needs to sign off after 20 weeks. In Victoria, it's 2 doctors have to sign off. In New Zealand, it's just one has to sign off after 20 weeks that it's okay, which is, there's even less of a safeguard. But we are seeing governments all around the world, they are introducing these lockdown measures, these social isolation measures, and obviously they're motivated, they don't want the health system overwhelmed, but it's primarily to save lives, mainly the elderly and the vulnerable, not letting them die. And we have seen some horrible hashtags on social media, such as boomer removal, that this is going to kill off all the old people, so we'll get some of the wealth. But the message is universally from the medical profession, which of course is their doctors have the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. We are doing this to protect the vulnerable, to protect life, and that is great.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the left will never let an emergency go to waste. The left will never let a crisis be squandered. And this is why they are rubbing their hands in situations like this. You mentioned F.A. Hayek earlier, the author of The Road to Serfdom. He actually said that emergencies have always been the pretext on which the safeguards of individual liberty have been eroded. And I think, boy, if that is ever so pertinent, it's for the times that we're living in right now. Now, H.L. Mencken said, "The urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule." So the left always rise to the occasion in the midst of crisis, in the midst of emergencies. And this is why Nancy Pelosi basically had a pork-stuffed bill that she was trying to get to ram through Congress. But she had all sorts of ridiculous things in that bill that had nothing to do with the coronavirus. Some of her agendas included ballot harvesting with no limit. There was, postal votes. She also emphasized where there was all these different things that were complete. Funding for abortion. Funding for abortion. All these things she tried to sneak into the bill to get it passed under the guise of the coronavirus emergency relief bill. But again, this is what the left does. They never let a crisis go to waste. They will do whatever they possibly can to expand the power of the state and to ensure that power rests into the hands of fewer and fewer people.
They call those hidden measures hidden in those sort of stimulus, they call them poison pills. That is a literal poison pill. Thankfully in Australia, there's... I know bipartisanship is not always a good thing, but we need politicians to not bicker during this time and work constructively. The National Cabinet has been functioning quite well, and I think I'm so glad that Scott Morrison's the Prime Minister at the moment and not
Me too.
Bill Shorten. Can you imagine him during this crisis? Scott Morrison seems... And he's had that horrible nickname, Scotty from marketing, but you sort of need a marketing guy to sort of soothe the nation, just basically, because he is sort of preempting the ramping up of the measures, giving us enough notice. So I think he is taking the right approach, and it's good that Anthony Albanese is the opposition leader. Even though he's from the left, you know that he's got a good heart. Yeah. He's in politics for the right reason, and
yes,
even we're seeing people like Mike Carlton and Bernard Keane on Twitter saying, "Okay, I'm going to stop with the ScoMo bashing," and that we're in a warlike situation. And so,
we are, yeah.
But it is. We are seeing, obviously, I talked about the lines at Centrelink. Reliance and dependence on government has already increased. You mentioned Rome before. They also debased the currency. That's what our government is doing as well, printing more money, creating it out of thin air, making everyone poorer. And our government doesn't have any money. It's in debt. It's borrowing it. But we are seeing civil society return. They're checking on your neighbours. The elderly. Charity and compassion are again on the rise. We see businesses even the banks granting grace on loans, and that would have been unspeakable 6 months ago. We know how immoral they've been, and we have seen the anger, rage, and selfishness subsiding a bit. And of course, I'm referencing the supermarket rage as well. We're seeing a bit more compassion, a bit more politeness, manners, that sort of thing. Like I try to do it at the beginning of the show, asking how are you and your family. I'm going to do that with all my guests now because it's good. We want to know during this crisis. Yeah,
absolutely. And like I said before, I don't think we're out of the woods yet, but it's thank God that we live in Australia, man. I mean, we live in such a blessed country in the sense that our healthcare is in a good position, and I hope it stays that way. I certainly hope that we don't go down the same road as Italy. There is an over dependence, I suppose, on government. But when it comes to over dependence, I think one of the greatest dangers that we face is our over dependence on China.
Yeah, definitely. And I've already spoken a lot about that as well.
Yeah, totally. I think we really need to look at ourselves in the mirror really hard, and really so many of these politicians, and this is on both sides of the political aisle, I would even say even more so in the Liberal National Party, really need to give themselves an uppercut for selling so much of our assets to the Chinese. There is no excuse for that. They are our enemy. And we really need to stop that. We need to get as much of those assets back as we possibly can, especially strategic assets such as the Port of Darwin and places like that. But we also need to look at sourcing our trade deals. We need to rethink our trade deals, and if there's other parts in the world where we can basically get the same thing. Sure, we might have to pay a bit more for it, but that's the way that it is. And see, China have played they're playing the long game here. This is all economic warfare. They are deliberately making their products as cheap as possible because they want us to rely upon them, and they get rich in the process. And so, so we've got some big decisions that lay ahead of us, that's for sure.
And definitely, I agree with you that Liberal National Party, they've just waved through the foreign ownership. I mean, what's the point in having a foreign investment review board? And China is, well, it's not communist in the strict sense, but it's a fascist state with both state and businesses working as one. And as I said in my introduction, we don't know to believe any of what they say. They could be telling the truth that they've got the virus under control. They should be lying through their teeth. I remember, was it just a couple of weeks ago, Bronwyn Bishop was pilloried on Sky News for saying that China released this virus to kill off their non-productive workers and spread it to the West to cripple us. And it was Nicholas Rees who said, well, have you been on some dark internet forum? But it sounds, you wouldn't put it past them. That's sort of where we're at with our trust in China and what they've done to the world with this virus.
Yeah, exactly. And look, leftism is extreme. I mean, China is the extreme left. If you want to see where the left is heading in regard to their trajectory, look at where China is at the moment. Their science department completely and wholeheartedly agrees with government policy. If they actually go along with empirical evidence and it contradicts the government policy, then the empirical evidence is wrong. The government is always right, and this is why it's so incredibly dangerous, because communist governments set themselves in the place of God. They set themselves in the place of God, and where they have no respect for life. They are the ones who get to choose who lives and who dies. This is what I mean. This is how they have set themselves up in the place of God. They basically decide who lives and who dies. They decide who gets what rights, so it's a major concern. And it's interesting because according to the founding father, American father Jefferson, the only firm basis of our liberties is a strong conviction that they come from God and are not to be violated by man. And for this reason, a secular government can never be a limited government, for it recognizes no authority other than itself, no rights other than those that it grants, and it believes it has a right to control everything it touches. So, and here's this is a quote from Greg Barnson. He said, if no divine law is recognized above the law of the state, then the law of man has become absolute in man's eyes, and then there is no logical barrier to totalitarianism. That is absolutely true, and this is why Christianity in many ways is the bulwark. It's the bulwark to Islam, and it's the bulwark to extreme leftism. And this is why we need it, because with Christianity, it places emphasis on individual liberty, on free markets, and it places emphasis on private property, which is a big one, because the left hate the idea of private property, and also free speech. And free speech is the most precious of all the freedoms, because it's by free speech that we defend all other freedoms, including freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. That's freedom of speech is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, free speech is definitely more important now than ever, and especially with I know the mainstream media, they say, "Oh, don't believe what you see on social media. Listen to us." But mainstream media have been using this opportunity to also sensationalize and scare a lot of people as well. And I talked about the Centrelink queues. That is government. A lot of people been talking about the shortages and queues at the supermarkets. They're getting better now. The major supermarkets, they've been able to drastically change how their supply chains operate, so everything gets to the supermarkets faster.
Yep.
They've already implemented social distancing in their supermarkets, and the reason also why the supermarkets have been able to get things back on the shelf is because government has got out of the way. They've cut the red tape, the restrictions on deliveries late at night. It's actually through implementing more free market solutions, and these companies are being talk about corporate social responsibility. We have seen actual proper practices of it, not making some rainbow flag Facebook filter. It's actually been actual where businesses on their own making long-term decisions for the better.
Yep. Thomas Jefferson said this. He said the natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and government to gain ground. He said that is the natural progress of things. Walter E. Williams, he's another great writer of mine, but he said, I am not saying that we are a totalitarian nation yet, but if you ask the question, which way are we headed, tiny steps at a time? Are we headed toward more personal liberty or more government control over our lives? It would have to unambiguously be the latter. More government control over our lives. And I just think, wow, he hit the nail on the head. We are basically slowly, and again, we go back to the analogy of the frog in the saucepan, to the frog in the pot. We are slowly, government regulation and government control is slowly strangling us and slowly getting the upper hand. It's funny because people say, that Centrelink, Christians who, conservatives who actually use Centrelink is a bad thing. And I say it's not a bad, they throw it up in our face and they say, you hate socialism, but you use Centrelink. The thing is that first of all, what we are getting from Centrelink is basically our own taxes back.
Yeah.
So we're getting our own taxes back. We were the ones who put our money in it in the first place. We're finally getting our money back. But secondly, if you were to go back 50, 60 years ago, what was the institution that was basically in charge of the welfare of the people? And that is the church. The church was the one that oversaw all of welfare and in regard to charity and all those things. That's why when you have a look at all the major charities that we have in our country right now, you look at the founding on how they came into being. They came into being because they were originally Christian charities. St. Vincent de Paul is a great example. The Smith family, which was started by Christian businessmen. And the same as Lifeline is another example. Lifeline was started by Christians. And then we also have World Vision. World Vision was founded by Christians. Compassion was another Christian organization. And so all these different, we take it for granted. In fact, it's almost as if we haven't even noticed the progression. But slowly but surely, as the church has retreated out of society, government has gained ground and taken the place of the church. And this is where we find ourselves now. And the trajectory isn't slowing down. We are still moving in that direction.
I want to finish off by talking about family, because saw a post from or a meme from a divorce lawyer who said, couples having to spend 6 months together in lockdown. I'm going to be in such a good business after this is over here," which is an extremely cynical position to take. But we have seen with a lot of parents these days, they dump their children at school or at childcare, basically leave them for them to be educated there. But we're seeing the schools close now, and for a lot of parents are now going to have to learn aspects of homeschooling, and are going to have the children at home full time, where they'll have to parent full time. And so you also hope that there's a turning point here as well, is that we'll see the return of family life, of families bonding together, parents properly raising their children with discipline, because I've noticed quite a few number of parents struggle just when I've been out of the supermarket, struggle to teach their children social distancing. And you talked before about was it in relation to God, with Him wanting the best for us. That's like parents are strict because they care. They've got to be.
Yeah, and I think when the crisis is finally coming to an end, and we're looking about reopening the schools, I think there's going to be a lot of relieved parents, and you'll see a lot of the bashing of homeschoolers. People are going to have a new respect for homeschoolers. I think a lot of parents are going to have a new respect for parents that take the time out of their schedule, who don't get paid, and basically teach their own kids. I mean, that's a huge call. I mean, I have a friend of mine who does that, and I have huge respect for him. But that's massive. I think we're starting to learn a lot of lessons. Tim, it's interesting because over the past fortnight, we are getting a taste of socialism. It's like we're getting a trial run of what life is like living in a socialist country. And I think, I'm hoping it's going to turn a lot of people off. I think it'll turn a lot of people off once they see the bread lines and the long queues. They'll think to themselves, well, we did that during the coronavirus. I don't want that again. And so I'm hoping that people will have a newfound respect for free markets, have a newfound respect for capitalism, and have a newfound respect for the family unit as well. And so, there are a lot of pluses that we can take away from this situation. So, we definitely need to focus on them.
If we did have socialism already, the supermarkets would already be empty even before the pandemic, like they were in Venezuela. Well, I'd like to thank you, Daniel, for coming on my show tonight and accommodating the rescheduling and the technical teething problems with me setting up my new home studio. I think we did in the end quite well. It's not all perfect. I had to readjust my chair during the show, but we did have a big audience tonight in the chat. So certainly a lot of people were interested to hear what we have to say, and turning to alternative media, and not just relying on what they're hearing from the mainstream media during this time as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Daniel, and take care. All the best to you and your family.
Thanks, Tim, and to you too.
Good night.
Good night.
Oh, there we go. First home studio show under the belt now, so it feels good. I've probably been feeling sort of extra stressed and just under the weather, basically, because it's basically like starting over again. I'm not in the comfort of the studio anymore. I've got to make it all work here from home as well, but did did pretty well. So I hope that you enjoyed the show. Obviously, it is now 5 minutes to 9 p.m. Melbourne time, so sorry for the late notice, but there won't be a Tuesday Uncockables again this week. So we'll just have the one Thursday show, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, the Uncockables YouTube channel. I can only do stream to YouTube at the moment, just based on the technical aspects. No D live for the time being, but just let me get settled in, and everything will be back up to full capacity. Though we are pretty much at already full capacity there. Binary Agenda says fixed entropy so that you can see questions properly again. Yes, I will do that, because basically now that I literally am housebound, I'll have all the time to send emails and communicate with everybody and things like that. So I will do that as well. I've just got a notification that the Dusty Bogan is doing his Cheap Tuesday stream at 8 o'clock Brisbane time, which is in 5 minutes. As far as I know, because I know that Dusty Bogan, he calls his Tuesday show Cheap Tuesday, is because it's KFC. They have their cheap chicken there. But thankfully for Dusty, KFC is deemed an essential service, though they have closed off their in-dining area, which I didn't have a problem with, because it was if you've been to a KFC, you just want to get takeaway. It's pretty filthy, the dine-in area there, but they're just doing drive-through, delivery and order, and takeaway in-store. And also McDonald's is doing that as well. So you can still get your Maccas through drive-through or delivery. Maccas and KFC, they are an essential service. As with the bottle shop, there was a reported run on bottle shops over the weekend, because everyone thought they might be closing with the lockdown. But no, we're in Australia. It's considered an essential service. I'll be back tomorrow night with the normal Wednesday night WilmsFront, 7 p.m. Melbourne time. My guest will be China expert Dave Lee, where we'll explore with him just how culpable China is for spreading this virus and essentially shutting down Western economies. Never again. We must be our mantra. Never allow the globalists to put us in this position. They're the ones that spread the virus, but never forget that it was born in China, born in Wuhan. It is the Chinese virus, and they must pay for it. All right, and make sure that you visit theunshackled.net and my own personal website, timwilms.com. Timwilms.com has got links to my own social media, Gab, Telegram, and also to the podcast version of this show, and theunshackled.net, your source of alternative news as well. So thank you so much for joining me on this first new stage of the show, and I will see you tomorrow night.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.